Welcome to the Toxin Terminator, helping people to restore and renew their health by removing the toxins from the home and their lives. Join in as industry thought leaders help you understand the physical and emotional effects these products can have on you and your family, and the safe alternatives you can use to remove the hidden toxins for renewed health. Now, please welcome your host, the Toxin Terminator herself, Amy Carlson.
Hello, everyone. I'm at. We're having a little technical difficulties here. That's okay. It is a beautiful day. It's always a beautiful day. It doesn't matter where we are. Today, we have got back with us again, Dr. Jim VanAllan. Thanks for coming back in. If you guys listened, episode 126, we were talking about communication. We were talking about relationships. We were talking about how we talk with other people and how we listen. And you dropped some good bombs on us at the end of that episode with your tips on some really good ways to effectively listen to other people. So if you haven't checked out that episode, make sure you get back over there and listen. Now, Dr. Jim VanAllan is a podcast host himself for Communicate to Motivate. He is the professor of communication studies. He teaches public speaking. He teaches interpersonal communications and business communications. He is the vice president of schools with the Jim Gordon Companies and also runs a program that helps transform school campuses culture across the nation. And I want to talk about that because we didn't get a chance to talk about that last time. We decided to do part 2 because we got dug into how we talk with others in that outer communication. But today, we really want to focus in on how we talking to ourselves. I call it toxic talk.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm thrilled to be back. When you get asked back, that means you did something right the first time. So I'm glad to hear that there's some value here too, right? There's a lot of value here. There is.
There truly is. You know, we are in the month of love. It's February, and I was just sharing with you before we went on air that everybody's really focused on those relationships. They're focused on, when you think about self-love, we think about things like, going for a walk, getting out in nature, journaling, praying, meditating, these kinds of things. But our inner dialogue is huge.
Yeah. Right. And what people have to realize is the impact you have on others. So I know you mentioned, in the intro, and people heard the intro coming in, how the toxins affect on you and your family. Your toxicity, your mental toxicity, what you put out there has a major impact on your family, your friends, your colleagues, and perception of you. We like to say that, well, I don't care what people think. You do. You don't want to admit it, but deep down inside, you do. And perception in this world counts. And it doesn't take much for people to have a negative perception of you based on what you say and what's on what your body language is and what's going on internally. So that's why I'm glad we're going to dive into it today.
I am too. And you know what? Once you tarnish that perception, it is so hard to get it back, right? And that takes, a lifetime of building that relationship and that trust and cultivating that integrity, but that's for another show. Let's talk about one, I want to make sure that we're talking about, our inner dialogue in retrospect to how it's affecting other people, but our inner dialogue in retrospect is how it's affecting us too. What do you want to dive into first with that?
Well, as far as how it affects us, I think it's first to start out and sort of admit that you talk to yourself, right? Admit that you talk to yourself and that it's okay. Because that running voice in our head that we have, we're not taking orders from it, but it's that inner dialogue on how we're feeling, our emotional states, how we feel towards somebody else who's approaching us or is around us. So I think that's a good place to start, is sort of admitting that we do talk to ourselves, and that if you control it the right way, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. So, that admission is the first step. It's the key in
That's
everything.
how all the programs go, right?
All programs start with the admission, right? So what do we want to be looking at with that? We all know we have these committees, and have you heard, I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we call it, that the monkey mind, the committee in the head. There's so many different things I've heard it called when we're referring to, how we self-talk.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different terms for it. And I think a good place to start with this is knowing that when you have positive self-talk, okay, it's going to help the flow of the normal flow of your body too, right? You get your mind right, your body kind of falls right along with it as well. Because when you can think more positive about things, when you can control what you say, you're going to be a little bit more upbeat. You maybe have a little bit more energy, and you're just going to, when you feel better, you want to go out and you want to see the world, you want to do things. So it really is a domino effect with just starting and getting the mind right. And whatever that voice is, whatever that committee is up there, kind of, that we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's important to know that is coming from us, okay?
Right.
And it's coming from us. It's not coming from anywhere else. So that means you're in control. We may not think that we are with our own thoughts, because you're like, where did this come from? Where did this come from? It's coming from somewhere. It really is. So we have to realize first that we're in control of how we think and how we feel and what we tell ourselves. And even though there are obviously other cases, like, the cases in depression and mental health issues where there's a lot of other things going on, I'm talking about the majority of us, who we're in control of our thoughts and feelings. But too many times it feels like we're out of control. And that's where it can turn really toxic. When we feel like these thoughts and feelings are coming from somewhere else, or we're letting others impact how we feel, impact what we're telling ourselves about maybe our body image or our successes and things like that, our decisions we make in this world. So they're coming from us, and we care a lot about what others think. And we're probably running through that dialogue in our head a lot on, well, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? I think it's good to kind of turn this conversation into, well, how do I feel about this? How does it impact me? And going from there.
Okay. So that what might be step number one, is instead of saying, and how is everyone else viewing this, or feeling about this, or thinking about this, but to turn it around and say, what do I want? What do I think?
Right. And it's not to say that you have to be selfish, right? Yeah, it doesn't mean you're selfish and you're like, well, I don't care what we have to take care. You have to take care of yourself, first. You have to get your mental state right, or that's going to be a problem for others around you, and people are not going to necessarily want to be around you. So I think it's okay to start out with yourself. Anytime I teach interpersonal communication, you know what chapter 1 is? Self-awareness.
Yeah.
Your own emotional state, and understanding what your triggers are, and going from there. So it's taking inventory of yourself. I would say taking inventory of yourself, what your personality is. So I've done a lot of, I'm just about to start a new podcast series on communication with different personality types. And it's going to be a fascinating road. But first, you have to understand, what is my personality?
Right.
Because certain personality types are going to lend itself to certain degrees of self-talk, negative, positive self-talk. It's going to lend itself to that. So you understand yourself first, your emotional state first, and then you can kind of, branch from there.
I love that. So how many different personality types are there?
Well, it depends on so that's the thing. It depends on the assessments you take. So like, I like doing enneagrams. Sometimes you've heard of Enneagrams sometimes, and they tell you there's nine types: the helper, the loyalist, the perfectionist. But then if you do Birds on a Wire, which is a great one for moms, they give you different, like 4 different colors that you are, and the colors mean something. I mean, Myers-Briggs and DCI, there's so many different types. But so that's why I would kind of do Enneagrams is a great place to start, just because you can understand, what, this is why I act like this. This is why I think like this.
Right.
And here's some research to show why. And then I feel like I'm not alone in this.
Right. Right.
And there's resources now where you're like, oh, okay, I am a bit of a perfectionist. Let me maybe seek out some podcasts and books, some help that helps to understand what this personality type is, what the communication styles are that go along with it, and the mental state of somebody inside that personality type.
Well, and I love that. And I think that's so important to understand what is going on and why it's going on. And this whole empowerment, I'm so about the empowerment, because, life isn't happening to us. Like, we're choosing how this is going. And if we want to take this mentality that everything's happening to us, that victim mentality, then we can't make those changes. And that empowerment gives us the power to say, wait a minute, this can be different, right?
Right. I mean, who wants to play the victim all the time? You're on your back all the time. That's not a position that you want to be in. It's not a good mental health position, because then you're constantly pointing the finger outward instead of pointing inward and owning your situation. And that's self-talk, because if you're doing that victim role, you're always self-talk saying, well, it's their fault, or I'm entitled to this, or, I'm in this position because of you, or what you said, this, when, hey, some of that may be true, obviously, sometimes it's just how it is. But how about we turn the finger back on ourselves and say, okay, how about what can I do about this situation? Right? Like, I'm in it. Instead of pointing the finger, why? Let's understand my role and what I can do to move forward through this situation. So it's a little bit of give and take, but I would always start with what's my role first.
Absolutely. In that too, well, I like to phrase when people say, well, when this happens, then I can do this. That's kind of a form of some negative self-talk too, because you're allowing some outer circumstances to dictate what steps and actions you're going to take.
And a lot of times, a lot of that is unfortunately the product of this is a culture of a culture of excellence, where we're putting everything out there. Mm-hmm. So social media, everybody's always broadcasting the big events and the positive, and sometimes there's some of us who we're not quite at that point, or we're just on different paths, and we're like, well, they have this and they've done this and they've achieved that, but I've only done this and this. Does this mean I'm not? We're constantly trying to measure ourselves up with others.
Compare.
Right, the comparison. We're always trying to do that, where my path is different than their path. They may have accomplished this, but you know what? I've done this, and we're just having different kinds of impact. And that can be a real strain on your self-talk, where you're constantly comparison. And then you're right. Then you're just sort of, you're living too much in the world. We're not supposed to live too much in this world, right? We're not supposed to be, we're not supposed to be everywhere and to be impacted by everything. We're supposed to rise. God calls on us to rise above that, mm-hmm. and be happy for others, right?
Right.
Don't envy what they have. Be happy for others. That's one of the commandments. And it's something we're working on with my kids too. They see that somebody on the street got a puppy. Well, I want a puppy, and our house isn't as good as theirs because they have a dog. No, 2 different situations, 2 different outcomes, 2 different versions of happiness. Right. I think we talked last time about, what do you need? Do you need success before happiness, or can you have happiness and then success? Mm-hmm. And is happiness, which one leads to one?
Right.
It's on you. It's all on you to talk yourself down. Admit that you talked yourself. Know that it's okay. And that's kind of where I don't want to say maybe struggled is the wrong word, but focus on a lot is. I'm a bit of an introvert, believe it or not, Amy. I may not seem like it in these interviews. I do podcasting. I do speaking for a living. I teach public speaking, but I'm in my head a lot. And
Yes.
maybe a lot of your listeners are too,
Yes.
where you're a bit more introspective, nostalgic, just very passionate, but it's inside a little bit. We run through options and scenarios in our head all the time, and we think about what we said. Did I say the right thing? Do I feel a lot of guilt that comes with that too?
Right. Right.
That to me, sometimes that can be toxic if
Mhm.
it's not dealt with appropriately. If you let it build up,
Right. And I feel
it's a
like
problem.
I, I so agree with you. There's so many people that are out in the public, viewpoint, and everybody would think that they're an extreme extrovert. And I'm an introvert as well. And I label myself as an extreme overthinker. I overanalyze, overthink things to the extreme. My husband has another word for it, but and what do you do with that? Because we're kind of in that same position. So how do we know we do it, right?
The overthinkers.
Yeah.
I think here's, like I said, admission is the first step too.
Yeah.
I think understanding, be comfortable with who you are. I think
Yeah.
that's first.
Oh,
So let's all of your listeners here, let's all take a breath and let's do some self-analysis and say, you know what? I realize X, Y, and Z. I have these different personality traits and quirks, whatever the case is. But you want others to accept you, number one, for who you are first. And that's not to say that you get then a free pass to just go and be, the negative things of who you are too. Or yeah, it's not saying that, but it's saying love me for who I am, but realize that I can still improve as well. That, okay, I appreciate you loving me for who I am. We want our spouses, right, and our kids to love us for who we are.
right.
But in saying that, I still want to improve. Okay,
Right.
I appreciate that you love me. I still want to get better.
Right.
And I have the self-talk to be able to tell myself that and do that, because that's a big thing that I want your listeners to realize is this negativity, this toxic self-talk that may be inside of you. You can work on that. It doesn't make you a bad person. If you're thinking negative, if you're an overthinker, and you know what? I don't think being an overthinker is necessarily a toxic thing or a negative thing. I really don't. If you do it to the extreme, if you do anything to the extreme, then yes. But for us, maybe who go through options and scenarios, that sometimes that's a level of comfort. And a lot of times for the people like us, but it's not anxiety for us. Routine and going through a logical dissecting a decision, or let's look at all of our options. Let's put everything out on the table before we make this decision.
Right.
That's comfortable for us.
Right.
That's not an anxious process. That's what we
Right.
need to do. So, and I think that's okay. And here's where somebody else in the relationship has to have positive self-talk and say, okay, I see that this is how they are. And you know what? It's not really a bad thing that they want to think through all the options. Hey, they're bringing up things that I never even thought of.
Right.
And together we can maybe balance each other out a little bit. But instead of pointing the finger at each other, right, and saying, well, you're like this, well, you're like this, or you don't understand me, you don't understand me, let's go into ourselves first, have that self-talk, and say, let me understand, let me understand them. Okay, let me have understanding and empathy on my heart and my mind, and just listen. And then, you're going to the information's all right there, right? And you can take it all in and move from there as you learn to be in relation with each other.
Right. Absolutely. And, I think for me that, being an overthinker and an overanalyzer, it's when it gets me to the point where I'm frozen, that's when it becomes toxic. If I'm not able to take action because I'm in that mode, that's when it's a problem. But if I'm moving through the process, it's okay.
And that's where we need, if you have a relational partner or somebody in your life to kind of help get you unstuck, because that's when us as overthinkers, you have to make a decision, whatever it is. That's when we need somebody to say, okay, it's time to move forward. Let's go with this best option. And then for us, we have to we have to not look back and hindsight's 2020, right? But we can't always look back, and you have to accept when you make a decision and say, we've made this decision, we've done the research, the cards may fall where they fall, and that's just going to be how it is. That takes self-talk, though, to say, to not always look back and say, oh, well, we should have done that, or we should have went with option B, or we should have. No, talk to yourself more than you listen to yourself, and it takes a lot of mental energy, and it really is like mental gymnastics sometimes for us inside of our head to be moving, living in the present, and looking ahead a little bit instead of constantly looking backwards and having doubt and regret, because that's just going to make you so negative. It's going to make you bitter. It's going to make you bitter towards the other person. Why did you let me make that decision? Well, hold on a second. We made this together, or I made this decision. You did, so that's where the self-talk part really comes into play too.
I love that. So we're talking about, all right, we've accepted that this is who we are. We've admitted, this is how it is. We're taking inventory. We're understanding why it is that we're the way that we are, and we're becoming comfortable. Okay, this is who I am. Doesn't mean I don't want to be, better. Where do we go next?
Well, so I think from this point here is where you can, believe it or not, your communication can really start to positively get better from this. Because if you're positive, if you've done all that, you've taken the inventory, you've accepted who you are, you're working on that voice inside your head and not letting it control you, and knowing that you control, you're in control. I think that helps you overall with being in better relationships with people around you, because you're going to be able to know maybe the right things to say to others around you. You're going to be able to build stronger relationships because you've sort of talked yourself into the fact, and now you believe that you want to be in relationship with people around you. You want to be a better team with people at work. You want to be in better communion with your spouse, and with your kids, because you're not feeling guilty or anxious, or you're not feeling upset too much in your head. I don't know about you, but if I'm feeling something in my head, like if somebody, I don't know, if somebody offends me or rubs me the wrong way or says, sometimes it's just the little things, right, that can really set you off. I won't blow up though. I won't be like all confrontational. I'll go inward, and I won't want to communicate. Right. I won't want to communicate. And people around me know it. My kids, my wife, they know it. It's like something's up. And that's not good for relationships.
No.
Too many of those instances is a problem. Now, some isolated here or there, no big deal, but too many is a pattern, right? So that's why I'm saying, if you can get that self-talk right in your head, if you can learn to deal with somebody offending you or a challenge in your life, you can deal with it a little bit more head on. You can maybe learn to say, well, hold on a second. Let's talk about this for a second. Why did you say that? Or what's going on here? You can, for lack of a better term, confront it right away, because when you go in your head, then you make it something bigger than it actually is. And that happens all the time. You blow it up in your head.
Oh yeah.
And when you get to then finally talk about it, we're emotional. And instead of just dealing with it right away and then boom, it's gone, we let it build and fester, and it gets out of control. And then it becomes this big to-do.
Oh, it's huge. And what a great, I wanted to kind of segue in our last, bit that we're talking about today. In the world we live in today, how much are we allowing those confrontations, those varying differences of opinions, and we're not being able to communicate. There's so much polarization, and not taking that time to sit in someone else's shoes, to empathize with them and to truly listen to, where they're coming from, instead of coming from a place of, you need to think the way I do.
Right. And unfortunately, talking politics sometimes is taboo. So we tend not to do it, but yet, political opinions are everywhere and everybody has them. Yeah. So we talk about them in what I call an unhealthy form, which is online. And I'm not going to harp too much on social media, but instead of talking it with adults amongst each other, we put these posts out there that are really inflammatory or derogatory, or it'll be the other way. And I don't do any political posts on my social media, but I've caught myself from time to time being like, that was a passive aggressive political post. Where I'm like, Jim, I'm sorry, you didn't say anything political or social, but you were certainly, the undercurrent was there.
Insinuation was there. And it doesn't even have to be political. I mean, everybody goes to politics, but it's, our current state of health in the nation. It's, do you do this? Do you not do this? It's religion, can you talk about it? Can you not talk about it? There's so many polarizations that are happening. And I see it all the time. And how do we teach? Is it just mirroring? Is it just, being out there and trying to be an effective moderator or listener or compassionate? I believe God calls us all for a purpose, and we're all on a different journey, and it's accepting of those journeys that everybody is on.
One of the most challenging things I've read in the Bible and what God has told us is, love your neighbor as I've loved you.
Yeah. And
that one gets me because, we know what kind of climate we're in right now. Everybody's dug in this side, the virus has become politicized, and health habits, masks, whatever needs to become politicized. Do you wear, do you not? Out of this, and we're so dug in, and we, almost to the point where we have this visceralness towards somebody on the other side, or almost like a hate or a extreme judgment. Oh, you voted for them, or you like them, and it's like all of a sudden, well, I can't associate with you anymore, and that's a shame. And God doesn't want us to do that. And I have to work on that myself. My family and I, we have strong beliefs and stuff in certain areas, particular areas. And we have to be certain that we're not just surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, right? Where we're just living in this bubble of safe communication. And if we do talk to people who are not on the same wavelength as we are, that we're listening and behind closed doors too, when we're not with those people. With my wife and I, not just being like, oh, did you hear what they said? I can't believe they're like that. But just being like, well, they made some good points, or I could just trying to understand where people are, from where they're coming. Well, and that's self-talk, right? That's hard to do that because, our way is the way, right? And nobody else can have a different version of that.
Well, and that leads me to, I mean, when did we become this, and I love that you said God calls us to love, as he loves us. That means no judgment. That means no judgment. That means no resentments. That means, forgiveness. And, we don't have to agree. We don't. We can live in harmony without having to agree with each other.
It's become way too personal now. Yeah. I don't remember politics and social stuff being as personal as it is now. So now, if it's personal, if it's core, if somebody says something again is not like that or doesn't believe that, we take it personally. So we get offended. So we get emotional. Right. When you get offended and when you get emotional, you put up the walls, you put up the barriers.
You're not listening.
You're not listening because you got all these walls up because, well, that's not how I feel, or it's too personal. You've offended me with this cancel culture. Everybody's offended by everything, and you can't say anything about this or that. And everything is, passive aggressive and subtle shots here or there. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's exhausting. If I didn't have to be a speaker and do my podcast work and all my work at schools, I probably wouldn't be on social media. I mean, I just wouldn't. You could get sucked down that road. And it's not going to be an easy fix. And I think as long as you have a very strict two-party system, it's not going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. Each figures of these parties are very polarizing. Congress is polarized. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It's not the result of of who was in charge the last 4 years. It's not solely on that, not at all. I think there are a lot of other huge mitigating factors and that pulled into that. So you can't just blame one person or one party or one thing. It's absolutely not that at all, because there's a lot of other things going on around this too that cause polarization. Amy, the enemy comes to divide. The enemy comes to divide and distort and create doubt and chaos and confusion. That is where the enemy thrives. Okay?
Absolutely.
This is where the enemy thrives, and we have to be able to see that. This is a time period. Read between the lines, okay? Read between the lines. Turn off mainstream media. Look at really what's going on, okay? Think for yourself, okay? If 99 people are doing something, maybe you need to be the one person to go the other direction, okay? And read between the lines, because the enemy is coming to distort. He has come to distort. He has come to divide. Everybody's talking about division, and I believe it is too. And everybody falls into the cracks, because that's where he wants us to be. He doesn't want us to be above this. He wants us to be in the cracks, in the gutters, rolling around in it, pointing fingers, being divisive, being split, because then our eyes are not on Jesus. They're on this world, too much on this world.
Yeah. Well, and this ties all back into the self-talk. It really does, because the onus is on you. The onus is on you. You get to control how you're going to do this within yourself. So you get to make the change. You get to be the change. You get to decide, wait a minute, not here. It's not going to happen. And I love that, because we're empowered.
We are. And, you know, I'm not sure if I said this last time, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's important. The only real control is self-control. Okay. It really is. The only real control is self-control. The sooner we all understand that as a society, you know, it's going to be so much better, because in a year last year that saw us being out of control in many different areas, we all felt like we were adrift because we're hit with so many different things. This needs to be a year about personal choices, and how everybody feels that, you know, you make positive personal choices on how you're going to view the world and view each other and view each other's beliefs. We all make that choice. Then you have collective belief. And you have collective belief that all of our individual positive choices towards each other and the world and our viewpoints will help this country to succeed, because political parties are not going to help this country succeed. The media is not going to help this country to succeed. It's all of us. It's the people making positive choices to respect each other is what's ultimately going to help this country to succeed.
I love that. I love that. And the only real control is self-control. I've written that down because that needs to be said over and over and over again. All right. We're at the end of our time. What do you want to leave our audience with in terms of toxic talk? Do you have, you know, top suggestions, last thoughts? What do you want to leave us with?
I'd like to say is give yourself grace. Okay. With negative self-talk or whatever you perceive it to be, have to be willing to give yourself some grace. Okay. We're not perfect. We're not designed to be perfect. You're not perfect. And it's okay. I remember talking to, you know, a counselor a few years ago, and them telling me, give yourself grace. It's okay. It's okay to be working on things and personal development. Keep going down that road. Don't ever give up on personal development. And if you start thinking negative thoughts, you start going down a certain road, give yourself grace to get up again, and then get up again and get up again. And don't constantly harp on yourself and make yourself feel bad because you slipped up, or then you have this regret and you have this bitterness. Give yourself grace, but always be pushing and moving forward.
I love that. Dr. VanAllan, thank you so much for coming back on and sharing such great insight with us. I'm forever grateful that we've met and can bring you to my audience. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you so much.
You bet.
That's all for this episode of The Toxin Terminator, and we hope we've helped you remove the hidden toxins in your life for renewed health. If you're looking to continue your journey towards full rejuvenation, reach out to Amy directly by visiting amycarlson.com for your own one-on-one chat session, as well as your free toxic risk assessment. That's AIMEEcarlson.com. And remember, you are just one small change away from renewed health.